Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's issue of the Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you the libertarian angle on what's going on in the world. And I'm joined, as I am every week, by my co-host Richard Ebeling, who teaches economics at the Citadel. Richard, good to see you again.
Good to see you too. You're looking chipper.
Thank you very much. Likewise. As many of you know, FFF is a nonprofit educational foundation that advances the principled, uncompromising case for the libertarian philosophy. You can find out more at fff.org. All of our Libertarian Angle shows are archived there. I write a daily article or a blog post. Richard's articles are published in our monthly journal, Future of Freedom. So come to FFF and visit us for a pure, uncompromising perspective on libertarianism. Okay, Richard, big scandal in the news, or what appears to be a scandal. We're not really sure it's a scandal yet, but obviously a lot of controversy over U.S. foreign aid, U.S. foreign meddling. It revolves around this issue that a whistleblower has filed a complaint against President Trump, complaining about something that he supposedly said in a telephone conversation with the president of Ukraine. The idea, the accusation or the implied accusation is that Trump withheld military aid to the Ukrainian government until he could be assured that the Ukrainian government would investigate Joe Biden or Joe Biden's son, who is on the board of directors of the largest private gas company there. And so everybody's agog over this issue, that did Trump do this? And if he did, should he be impeached for it? Trump's come back and saying, well, Biden needed to be investigated for corruption in Ukraine because apparently Biden's son joined the board of directors of this natural gas company after the regime change operation that took place in Ukraine. And it has the appearance of like a reward or a thank you for putting this guy in office. And that was the big regime change operation where they put in a pro-U.S. dictator as compared to a pro-Russia dictator. And of course, then that set off the whole Russia separatist movement, the Russian invasion of Crimea. But so Biden's son ends up on the board of directors of this private gas company, drawing huge amounts of money. So all this thing is just blowing up now with accusations and cross accusations. I find the whole thing quite amusing. One aspect that I find amusing is this shock that Washington D.C. and the mainstream press are expressing over the possibility that Trump used foreign aid or a threat to withhold foreign aid in this manner. I mean, who are these people kidding? I mean, that's the whole purpose of foreign aid, is to get foreign regimes to do the bidding of the U.S. government. I mean, does anybody really think, Richard, that foreign aid is for the poor, needy, and disadvantaged? I mean, everybody at least should know, at least we libertarians know, that foreign aid is nothing more than a bribe. It's a bribe to get foreign regimes to do our bidding. In fact, a few years ago, they did a study and found that when these impoverished third world countries got on the National Security Council in the United Nations, because they have certain seats that are rotating in addition to the permanent members, that as soon as they took their seat, their U.S. foreign aid would skyrocket it. And then as soon as they got off the Security Council, the foreign aid would drop back down again. And then there's that famous story when there was a vote being taken, I think it was for the invasion of Iraq, and Yemen said no in the United Nations. We vote against this. And James Baker said, that's going to be the most expensive vote you've ever taken. And from that point on, there was no more foreign aid to Yemen. I mean that's how foreign aid works. And so this shock that President Trump withheld the foreign aid in July until he could be assured that they were going to investigate Biden is just laughable. I mean, that's the whole purpose of foreign aid. And so to me, it's like pox on both their houses that you've got this foreign meddling in Ukraine. I mean, that's bad enough. I mean, it's another example of where foreign interventionism has all these perverse results. And this thing of Biden's son happening to be asked to serve on this board of trustees after this regime change operation takes place. I mean, this is standard stuff that goes on when you've got an interventionist state. And you've got, there's an ethical principle: avoid even the appearance of impropriety. So Biden's saying, well, there's nothing illegal about him joining this board. Well, that may well be, but it looks just horrible that you've got the U.S. supporting this regime change, and then under Biden and Obama, and then as soon as the regime change is effected, Biden's son is appointed to this board, drawing in huge amounts of money. Well, it just looks really, really bad. It has the appearance of impropriety. But, Democrats and Republicans, they've never placed a very high value on ethical principles. You can see that in the Trump administration, where you see the bureaucrats leaving the Pentagon and joining the military-industrial complex, this revolving door between them and other bureaucrats in the agency. They leave there and they go from the SEC to the private sector and make huge amounts of money off their influential positions that they held in the government. You've got the military now staying at Trump hotels. I mean, there's never been a high regard for ethical principles in these two parties. And I say what's going on right now just pox on both their houses. What do you think?
Well, this has been going on for a very long time. One of the stellar foreign policies of the United States in the immediate post-World War II era, as some viewers and listeners may recall from their history, was the Marshall Plan. This was, for that time, a relatively large infusion of U.S. Foreign aid to Britain, France, occupied Western Germany, Italy, Belgium, and so on, all under the idea that, well, their economies have been badly battered. We're going to give our helping hand just out of humanitarian concern. But the fact is that Washington was concerned about the already Soviet control of Eastern Europe and the growth and influence of communist parties that might either win in elections or take over the government in non-democratic ways in Western Europe. And that a way of influencing citizens and the governments of those countries to be pro-American, anti-communist, keeping the Soviets at a distance, was all this foreign aid. It was basically bribery money to basically keep Western Europe in what became what would eventually become the NATO camp when NATO was set up in 1949. So this has been going on. I have been to Guatemala in Central America a few times, and I remember being told that several years ago, at least 10 years ago, the Guatemalan government was concerned about the difficulty of fighting drug dealers who were using Guatemala as a transit point from South America to the United States. A lot of corruption, a lot of deaths and violence. And they just wanted to take their hands off, like, it's better to leave it alone than to constantly be making our domestic political and social situation so bad. Well, the U.S. government got wind of this, and what several people in the Guatemalan political circles told me on one of my trips there a good number of years ago was that they got the word, well, sometimes economic arrangements come up for renewal. And maybe if Guatemala takes this attitude of not being as tough on the war, the international war on drugs, that maybe Guatemala's most favored nation status of basically nearly duty-free export of their commodities to the United States might have to be revised. In other words, protectionism would now hurt the Guatemalan exporters. This strong arming has been going on all the time. And most recently, Edward Snowden, the whistleblower on the pervasive and massive surveillances on American citizens in the post 9/11 era, has done some interviews with some American media, and also this past week a rather detailed and lengthy interview in Der Spiegel, the German weekly news magazine. There's an English edition of it, in which he says in one of these interviews that he had no plan to go to Russia. He had no desire to be in Russia, deal with the Russians, but that he had been approaching when he was in Hong Kong and first, figuring out what he was going to do after leaving the United States. And he started releasing this information to certain selected people in the media. Where was he going to go? And according to Snowden, he surreptitiously, I guess through his lawyer, contacted about 20 governments from Western European governments like Norway, Germany, France, to South American countries, including the one he had hoped to be able to end up in, Ecuador, if they would give him refugee status, a political asylum, if you will. And that at the end of the day, every one of those governments turned him down, and it became known to him because Joe Biden, who was vice president of the United States, Joe Biden told the representatives of these governments, if you give Ed Snowden asylum, there will be consequences. Now, is that as specific as supposedly a week before a telephone conversation, Trump says, don't release this economic aid to Ukraine, but it carries the same weight. There will be consequences, military, economic, political, under the Obama administration, all from the arm twisting of Joe Biden, the supposed leader of the pack among the Democratic candidates for their party's nomination for the presidency. This has been notorious throughout American history, particularly and most especially during our interventionist epoch, which began during and then accelerated after the Second World War. I'm just amazed, as you are, Jacob. It's like that scene in the famous World War II movie Casablanca, starring Humphrey Bogart, where Claude Rains, who plays the prefect of police, orders that Rick's cafe be shut down. And Rick says, on what grounds? And he says, I'm shocked. I'm shocked to find out that in your nightclub there's gambling going on. And one of the croupiers comes up to the prefect of police and says, you're winning, sir. I mean, give me a break. I mean, this everything that the United States government accuses other governments of doing. Most recently, Russia tampering in the American election. What the hell has the United States government done in country after country since 1945? Bribing politicians, looking the other way, or collaborating in the assassination of political leaders, giving military aid to countries that we declare to be anti-communist, and then they use the military equipment or training that we've given them to torture and imprison or kill their own citizens, because those in political power in those countries are more concerned with their own power than just fighting commies. Give me a break. This is the history of American foreign policy. It's not even the pot calling the kettle black. There is no difference between a pot and a kettle. It is American foreign policy. It is hypocrisy. It is lies. It is distortion. And it's just the political manipulation of people's minds through rhetoric and propaganda to support someone and oppose another in the game for power in Washington, D.C. It is corrupt and it is contemptible. And that's my calm, deliberative, non-biased view.
Well, and Chile's a good example of what you were talking about, that here the Chileans democratically elect a socialist named Salvador Allende to be their president, and which they had to do. They had the right to do. It's a democracy, so they liked this guy and they elected him. And immediately the CIA, with the complicity of the U.S. government, goes on the attack, and they start. Allende had not gotten a majority of the votes, so the election was thrown into the Parliament, the Congress. But it was standard procedure that whoever was leading the election, that the Congress would confirm as president. So the CIA goes in there and starts offering bribes to the members of the Chilean Congress. Don't confirm Allende as president. We'll pay you money out of U.S. taxpayer money. And to the credit of the Congress, they said, go take a hike, and they confirmed Allende anyway. Of course, in the long run, they ended up ousting Allende in a coup that left him dead and installed an unelected military dictator in his stead, and that was Pinochet. There's another angle here, too, though, that, from the standpoint of the recipients of this foreign aid, it's a great bonanza, Richard, because the money does not get down to the poor, needy, and disadvantaged like a lot of Americans are taught in their civics classes in high school. This money ends up in the bank accounts of the president of the country and his military generals and the high officials within the government. They allocate it in certain ways, or the president gets the lion's share, of course, because he's the president. But it ends up in their private bank accounts. That's what this money's really all about, is to keep that dictator in power by feathering the nest of his subordinates, his generals, so that they stay loyal to him. And we got to also keep in mind that this is straight socialism. I mean, like the Marshall Plan that you talked about. It is the government taking money from people in the private sector to whom it rightfully belongs. They've produced it, they've earned it, but the government takes their money, or a large portion of their money, and gives it to these dictators overseas. I mean, that's classic socialism, from each according to ability to each according to his need.
I think the word is greed.
Yeah, greed. Yeah, that's part of it. It's a government greed. And then finally, Richard, look, we're looking at out-of-control federal spending. Everybody knows this. Even the guy that doesn't pay any attention to politics at all in this country knows that the government's deeply in debt, $22 trillion plus now. Trump has said that he's going to spend $1 trillion more than what he's bringing in this year. That means another $1 trillion in debt. And yet they keep putting out this foreign aid. If there was ever a place you could slash federal spending, just stop all this foreign bribery. Stop the foreign aid to every regime. And yet you see no movement toward that by either Democrats or Republicans, because they all love playing this bribery game. That as long as that foreign regime is on this dole, as long as they're dependent on putting this money in their Swiss bank accounts and buying nice schools and for their children to attend overseas and so forth, and nice vacations, they're going to continue wanting to receive that money. But it's really up to the American people to say, why should our monies that we earn, that we produce, be going into the pockets of these people? And it's also in the interest of U.S. politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, to maintain this crooked and corrupt system, because when they get in office, they want to be ordering these foreign officials what to do and what not to do as well. It's a totally corrupt process.
Yeah, I think your example of or the use of the word socialism is relevant here, for the simple reason it's another form of government planning. We are deciding the makeup or the composition or the policy direction of foreign governments, and we will siphon off the income and wealth of the American citizenry and redistribute it, redirect it into those avenues on the great chessboard of the global society in which we think things should be arranged. One other thing here, this idea that, it's all altruism. If you look at the details, for instance, of the Marshall Plan, there were strings tied to the money that those Western European governments got. A large portion of the money that we gave them for their reconstruction had the strings tied to it that they had to purchase American exports of machinery, equipment, agricultural goods. So this basically was an indirect way for the U.S. government to subsidize, through taxpayers' money, various selected sectors of the U.S. economy in the immediate post-war period. So this is just business as usual, just using a foreign middleman, a shell corporation, if you will, to get money to a domestic interest via the foreign funnels. And that can't be denied at all. I mean, just think of this situation in the Middle East because of these attacks on Saudi oil fields. Now, Jacob, maybe I didn't double check. I don't believe that we have a mutual military defense pact with Saudi Arabia. We have relationships, we have agreements, we might have some treaties with them, but to my knowledge, we do not have a mutual assistance military pact with them. It's unfortunate that their oil fields got knocked out because of their fight with the Iranians, with their surrogates in Yemen. But what does this do? What has this got to do with the United States? Other than, as Trump keeps saying, when that Saudi correspondent was murdered in was murdered in Saudi Arabia's embassy in Istanbul, Turkey. What was Trump's attitude? They buy a lot of our stuff, meaning military hardware and equipment and material. That's all. He's just explicit about it. Trump has a lot of failings that drive people crazy, and I'll admit, me too. But there's one refreshing element to him. He doesn't hide anything under phony baloney rhetoric. It's buying support. It's getting them to buy our stuff that we want us, the government, them to buy. I mean, there's a refreshing honesty about the plunder and the corruption of the way he operates. in this international setting, for instance. So what is this? They get bombed. We are now going to send more troops over, more material, either just as aid or through sales. And this is bolstering up interest groups in the United States that a president wants to pander to, as if this hasn't been done by other presidents of both political parties in the past. This is just business as usual, and it shows the corruption and the how can I put, not just the corruption, but the perversity of a government that gets beyond its original, in the U.S. constitutional sense, its original functions are primarily protecting life, liberty, and honestly acquired property. When it goes beyond that, it becomes nothing more than a game of redistributing other people's wealth in ways that serve the interests of the politicians and the bureaucrats housed in Washington, D.C.
Those are great points. Let me address two of them. One was on your Marshall Plan example, which I thought was very good because, you know, what are we taught about the Marshall Plan? Oh, that it brought Europe prosperity, that it got them out of the throes of World War II or West Germany, and this was the cause of the economic revival in West Germany. I mean, that's what's taught in every civics class, every college World War II class, and it's just nonsense that, you know, this is a socialist program. Socialism doesn't work. It's not what brought Germany, West Germany, into this economic revival. That was the free market that did that. You had Repka there in Germany that was lifting all the controls that the Allied powers had on the economy, price controls, wage controls. They had told him, you don't have the authority to lift those controls. And Repka was a classical liberal and says, well, I got news for you. I'm going to do it anyway. And he did it some Sunday without the authority of the Allies. And that's when West Germany's economic revival began, when you lifted the controls that the Allied powers had imposed and were trying to enforce. But at the same time, they've got the Marshall Plan. So like with any socialist project, they point at the plan and say, see what the plan did? Well, the plan had nothing to do with it. It actually impeded growth. The real growth came about from these free market philosophies. Now, on your other point, you know, the corrupting aspect of all this, that it's not just the corruption of foreign officials. I mean, you see Trump saying, oh, well, I was interested in finding corruption in the Ukrainian government, which is ironic because, you know, I was at a party right after the Ukraine regime change operation. It was a party of libertarians. And there was a conservative-oriented libertarian there that was just saying, oh, it was necessary that this guy be ousted from power. He was corrupt. He had this huge palace. Imagine the palace this guy had when they found it. And I'm just sitting there saying, give me a break, you know. The new regime's going to be just as corrupt, and it is. I mean, they just do one regime change operation, and they put in another one. And then there's this aspect that you pointed out, the alliances with these corrupt regimes that comes with this interventionist foreign policy. And Saudi Arabia is a classic example. I mean, you've got this corrupt, murderous, authoritarian regime that executes people at the drop of a hat, that denies women equal rights, that denies people voting rights. I mean, if there was ever a classic example of an authoritarian regime where there is not freedom, it's got to be Saudi Arabia. I mean, you try to criticize the regime there, and you're executed or at least jailed for 30 years. But here, there's this mindset that, oh, this is our ally, this is our partner. We have to send troops over there because their oil fields got damaged. Give me a break. Part of this is the old mindset, Cold War mindset of the national security establishment. When the Pentagon's operating all these ships and planes and tanks, they have this horrible fear that they're not going to have enough oil. And so they've always had this mindset, oh, we have to stay friends with Saudi Arabia because they have the oil. Well, it's ridiculous. Oil is fungible. Once it's put in the marketplace and they're going to sell it to whomever because they got to survive and prosper, then you buy it from somebody else. You don't need to have alliance with the brutal dictators just because they own oil fields. So the whole process is corrupt. And I'm not here to suggest that Donald Trump's the problem or Joe Biden's the problem. The problem is a systemic one. And it involves with foreign intervention, foreign meddling, foreign empire, and foreign aid. That's the heart of the problem. If you want to get rid of the corruption, just stop all that and the corruption disintegrates. The answer does not lie in trying to get better people in public office to manage this corrupt system. Because when you got good people in public office trying to run a crooked and corrupt system, the system's going to win out every single time.
I'm just going to add one thing so we're not inundated with comments after viewers watch this. Yes, the German miracle is based upon eliminating the wage and price controls, the production regulations in what were the British and American zones of West Germany. However, it wasn't Wilhelm Röpke. It was Ludwig Erhard.
Ah, Erhard. Yes, yes, sir.
He had been appointed the economic minister for those for the Allied occupied part of Germany, and on a Sunday in 1948, while the occupation officers were off, he went on the radio and declared that as of Monday, all the wage and price and production regulations will be gone. And as the story goes, and it's related both by Erhard and the American military general in charge, General Lucius Clay, is that Clay had a meeting with Erhard. And Lucius Clay said, Herr Erhard, all of my advisors tell me that what you've decided to do, lifting all of these controls and allowing a free market to operate, is going to lead to a disaster. And to which Erhard replied, General Clay, don't worry. My advisors tell me the same thing, but it's all going to work out.
And it did. I mean,
it did.
They lift the controls, and immediately that's when the revival began. But you got the statists over here in America saying, no, it was all because of the Marshall Plan that West Germany came back. Well, if that was the case, East Germany would have prospered too, because they had massive amounts of Soviet aid coming in to help them that was essentially akin to the Marshall Plan. So, yeah, it's a crooked, corrupt system, Richard, but as libertarians, what we're trying to do is raise people's vision to a higher level, a different level, one that doesn't involve accepting what is, which is a crooked and corrupt system of foreign interventionism, foreign meddling, foreign alliances with dictators. End that foreign system, which is really alien to our founding principles. I mean, our founding principles opposed all this. Our ancestors, the framers, opposed it. That's why there was no foreign wars, foreign aid, foreign meddling, foreign interventionism, foreign empire, foreign military bases for more than 100 years. It was that turn toward empire and intervention that produced and then encouraged and nurtured this crooked and corrupt system. What we've got to keep doing is just raising people's vision to a higher level, one that involves a truly limited government republic, which necessarily entails dismantling this crooked and corrupt system as compared to trying to find somebody that is going to be able to manage it. Because, as I said, when you've got a crooked and corrupt system, the system's always going to win out.
Yes, if those in a foreign country are concerned about assistance for their own economic development, the solution is at home. Don't rely upon aid from America or any other country. Get your own house in order. Low taxes, limited government, respect for private property, allowing an unregulated free market under the impartial rule of law to operate in the wider setting of respect for the freedom, the rights, and the dignity for individuals to freely go about their lives in an environment of free association of markets and the institutions of voluntary civil society. That is the setting for freedom and prosperity, not handouts from America, which twists and corrupts both what goes on in that country and, as we've been talking about, the politics at home here in America as well.
Yeah, essentially do what Erhard did. Lift all the controls in your country, get government out of economic activity, get rid of all the social welfare programs. In other words, stop government from helping people. That was the central message of Adam Smith in his book, The Wealth of Nations. Separate the economy and the state if you want to see prosperity in your country, instead of relying on this foreign dole to line your own pocket. That may do well for the dictator in power and his henchmen, but it does nothing for the standard of living of the people in that country.
Absolutely.
On that note, Richard, need to wrap it up. We're out of time. I enjoyed the conversation as always, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Until next time, and as I always like to remember, I just want to thank our viewers and listeners to sharing a little bit of their time with us.
Yeah, and thank you all very much for your interest and for your support. You know, y'all helped us out with a marketing campaign that we're now launching, and the first stage of this is today. We're launching a what we're calling a new podcast series called Liberty View. It's going to be a series of 2-minute audio messages by me as president of the foundation. Our first one is on Donald Trump, totalitarianism, or you know, whether he is leading us toward a totalitarian state with his policies. So it's a short podcast, 2 minutes long. It's just now posted on our website. It'll go out in FFF Daily. Appreciate it if y'all share it with your friends. I think you'll like it. So thank you again for tuning in, for your great support, and we'll see y'all next week.